Maraṇasati, the Buddha's most radical teaching about death. Part 1. The Claim. The Buddha prescribed a practice for monks to do every single evening before sleep. It involves sitting down and imagining, in detail, all the ways you might die tonight. Snakebite, scorpion sting, your food turning to poison in your stomach. The wind forces inside your own body turning against you. And the result of this practice, according to the Buddha, is not anxiety, not dread, not some grim resignation about the human condition. The result is joy, not metaphorical joy, not peace that passes understanding joy. Actual joy, piti, rapture, arising so naturally that, and these are his words, no act of will is needed. That claim should stop you. Because everything you've been told about thinking about death, by therapists, by culture, by your own nervous system, says the opposite. Death awareness is supposed to produce anxiety, terror. At best, a kind of stoic acceptance you grit your teeth through. The Buddha says you're doing it wrong. And tonight, by the end of this video, you'll have the exact practice he prescribed, step by step, not as philosophy, as something you can do on the edge of your bed tonight, before you close your eyes. But first, we need to understand why this claim is so radical. And for that, we start with 6 monks and a question that most of them got wrong. Part 1. The Claim. The 6 monks. The Buddha once gathered a group of monks and asked each one a simple question. How do you practice mindfulness of death? AN 6.19. The first monk said, I contemplate, may I live for a day and a night that I might attend to the Blessed One's instructions. The second, may I live for a day. The third, may I live for the time it takes to eat a meal. The fourth, may I live for the time it takes to chew and swallow 4 or 5 morsels of food. The fifth, may I live for the time it takes to chew and swallow a single morsel. And the sixth, may I live for the time of a single breath. Now, you'd expect the Buddha to praise the progression, shorter time frame, more urgency, more awareness, and he does distinguish between them. But his response is not what you'd expect. The first 4 monks, including the one who said 1 meal, the Buddha called heedless. Pamata, developing mindfulness of death, he said, slowly. The Pali word is dandam, sluggishly. Only the last 2, 1 morsel, 1 breath, he called heedful, appamata, developing it acutely, tikkum, sharply, like a blade. Think about what that means. A monk who contemplates death at the scale of a single day. The Buddha considers that heedless, not wrong, not sinful, just not awake enough, still operating with too much runway, still assuming tomorrow, 1 breath. That's the unit of awareness the Buddha considers adequate. And here's what makes this more than a thought experiment: the purpose. The Buddha doesn't say, do this so you feel appropriately somber. He says, do this for the sake of ending the effluence, asavanam kayaya, for liberation, for the end of suffering. Death awareness isn't the destination, it's the door. Part 1. The Claim. The counterintuitive claim. Now, modern psychology has studied what happens when people think about death, and the findings seem to flatly contradict the Buddha. Terror management theory, developed in the 1980s by Greenberg, Solomon, and Piszczynski, found that when you flash subliminal death reminders at people, they become more defensive, more hostile to outsiders, more desperate to shore up self-esteem, more rigid in their worldview. The unconscious brush with mortality doesn't open people up. It closes them down. If you stopped there, you'd conclude the Buddha was simply wrong. Death contemplation produces anxiety and defensiveness, not joy and liberation. But researchers kept digging, and what they found in the early 2000s changed the picture completely. Kozolino, Likens, Niemiec, independently, discovered a critical distinction. Suppressed death awareness, the kind that flickers at the edge of consciousness and gets pushed away, that produces terror, defensiveness, contraction, but sustained, conscious death, contemplation, the kind where you sit with mortality deliberately, eyes open, mind steady, produces the opposite: intrinsic motivation, generosity, connection with nature, pro-social behavior, a reorientation toward what actually matters. The Buddha, 2,500 years earlier, prescribed the second, not a fleeting reminder, a practice, nightly, deliberate, structured. And he went further than any psychologist has, because he mapped exactly how sustained death contemplation transforms into joy, not as metaphor, as mechanism. That mechanism is what we turn to now, and it begins with the most detailed death meditation protocol in the entire Pali Canon, a practice so precise it reads almost like a clinical manual. Part 2. The Mechanism. The Evening Protocol. There is a companion sutta to the one we just heard, also called the maraṇasati Sutta, also in the Book of Sixes, AN 6.20. But where the first sutta asked, "How urgently do you practice?" this one answers a different question. What exactly do you do? And the protocol it lays out is remarkable. Step 1. In the evening, and again at dawn, the monk sits down and contemplates the specific physical causes of death that could end this life before morning. The text lists them. A snake might bite me. A scorpion might sting me. A centipede might bite me. I might stumble and fall. My food might disagree with me. Bile might become disturbed. Phlegm might become disturbed. The wind forces in my body might become disturbed. Notice what this is not. This is not abstract philosophizing about mortality. This is not, we all die someday. This is viscerally specific. The Buddha is asking you to sit with the physical fragility of your body. Tonight, the venom, the misstep, the organ that quietly fails, the breath that, for reasons no one can predict, simply doesn't come. This is the mirror, death held close enough to see your own reflection in it. Step 2. Having established this, having genuinely confronted the possibility that tonight is the last night, you ask yourself one question. Are there any evil, unskillful qualities that I have not yet abandoned? Not. Am I a good person? Not. Have I accomplished enough? Not. Will people remember me? One question. Are there qualities in my mind, greed, ill will, cruelty, deception, that I know are there and haven't yet dealt with? This is the examination. Death is the mirror, and what you're looking at is the state of your own mind. Part 2. The Mechanism. The Binary. And now comes the turn, the part that makes this practice unlike anything in modern psychology or philosophy. The answer to that question splits into exactly two paths. No third option, no spectrum, binary. Path A, you examine yourself and find, yes. There are unskillful qualities I haven't abandoned. I know they're there. I've been avoiding them, rationalizing them, postponing dealing with them. The Buddha's instruction: practice to abandon them with extraordinary desire, effort, diligence, endeavor, relentlessness, mindfulness, and alertness. The Pali simile is vivid, as when a person whose turban or head was on fire would put forth extraordinary desire, effort, diligence, endeavor, relentlessness, mindfulness, and alertness to put out the fire on his turban or head. Your head is on fire. Act accordingly, not tomorrow, not after the retreat, now. Because the snake, the scorpion, the bile, the wind, they don't wait for your schedule. Path B. You examine yourself and find, no, there is nothing unresolved. The qualities I needed to abandon, I've been working on them. My mind, right now, in this moment, is clean. Not perfect, not enlightened, but clean. Nothing I'm hiding from. And here, the Buddha says something that changes the entire frame of this practice. Piyu tipamojena vihatabam. One should dwell in joy and rapture, not feel relieved, not accept your mortality with equanimity. Dwell in joy and rapture. Two Pali words, piti, the intense energetic surge of rapture, and pamoja, the lighter, warmer glow of gladness, both of them, together, as the natural state of a person who has looked death in the face and found nothing unresolved in their own mind. And then the sutta adds one more line, almost quietly. This practice gains a footing in the deathless, has the deathless as its final end. Contemplate death. Arrive at the deathless. We'll return to that irony. But first, you're right to ask, why? Why would death awareness plus ethical clarity produce joy? That's not obvious. That's not intuitive. That needs a mechanism. The Buddha provides one, and it's one of the most elegant chains of causation in the entire canon. Part 2. The mechanism, the cascade. In the Patācārā Sutta, AN 11.2, the Buddha lays out a sequence, not a metaphor, not a suggestion, a sequence, each step arising from the previous one automatically, the way a tree produces fruit, not by trying, but by nature. It begins with virtue, sala, ethical conduct, not rule following for its own sake, but the actual lived state of someone who has stopped causing harm, who has looked at their actions, their speech, their intentions, and cleaned them up. Not perfectly, but genuinely. From virtue arises avipattisara, non-remorse. And this is the hinge the entire chain turns on, because most people carry, underneath everything, a low-grade hum of regret. Things said that shouldn't have been said. Things done that can't be undone. Small betrayals rationalized. That hum is so constant, most people stop noticing it. The way you stop hearing the refrigerator until it shuts off. A person of genuine virtue, someone who has actually dealt with their unskillful qualities, that hum goes silent. And in the silence, something arises. Pamoja. Gladness, not excitement, not pleasure from getting what you want. A quieter thing, the natural lightness of a mind that isn't hiding from itself. And here's the line that changes everything. The Buddha says, for a person of virtue, cetanaya karanyam, there is no need for an act of will. May gladness arise in me. It is dhammata, in the nature of things, that gladness arises in a person of virtue. Let that land. Joy is not the reward you manufacture. Joy is not the thing you earn by suffering enough, meditating long enough, believing hard enough. Joy is what naturally happens when the obstacles are removed. You don't create it. You stop blocking it. The sequence continues. From gladness arises piti, rapture, that stronger, more energetic surge. From rapture, the body settles into passaddhi, tranquility. From tranquility, sukha, deep pleasure, not sensory, but the pleasure of a calm, collected mind. From pleasure, samadhi, concentration, the mind gathered and unified. From concentration, yathabhutanyanadasana, knowledge and vision of things as they actually are. And from there, disenchantment, dispassion, release. Part 2. The mechanism, connecting the chain. Now step back and see the whole architecture. Death awareness, the practice in AN 6.20, does one essential thing. It strips away what Buddhists call the intoxication with life, Jivitamata, AN 5.57, that comfortable fog that says, "I'll deal with it later. There's always tomorrow." It's not that urgent. The 5 daily contemplations in AN 5.57 make this explicit. The Buddha asks you to reflect. I am subject to aging. I am subject to illness. I am subject to death. I will be separated from everything dear to me. I am the owner of my actions. And the closing line, often missed, reframes the entire exercise. The person who contemplates these truths, the Buddha says, comes to see renunciation as rest, not renunciation as sacrifice, not as gritting your teeth and giving up what you love, as rest. Like setting down a bag you didn't realize was heavy until someone pointed out you could put it down. For the audience hearing this, and many of you know exactly what this means, there comes a point where accumulating more, defending more, maintaining more, stops feeling like living and starts feeling like carrying. The Buddha's claim is that death awareness is what lets you see the bag, and ethical clarity is what gives you permission to set it down. When the fog of "there's always time" lifts, when you genuinely confront "tonight might be the last night," 2 things happen simultaneously. First, urgency. Whatever is unresolved becomes impossible to ignore. The head-on fire response. You deal with it, now. Second, and this is the part almost everyone misses, relief. Because when you actually deal with it, when the unskillful qualities are abandoned, when the mind is genuinely clean, the cascade in AN 11.2 begins on its own. Virtue to non-remorse, to gladness, to rapture, to tranquility, to concentration, to wisdom, to freedom. No act of will needed. The Dhammapada captures this in a single verse, one the Buddha considered so essential it became, effectively, his last word on earth. Heedfulness is the path to the deathless. Heedlessness is the path to death. The heedful do not die. The heedless are as if already dead. D8P21, Appamada, heedfulness. When the Buddha lay dying at Kisāgotamī, surrounded by monks, his final instruction was not about emptiness, not about nirvana, not about any advanced doctrine. It was this: all fabrications are subject to decay. Bring about completion by being heedful. DN 16. Appamadena sampadetha, the last word of a dying teacher, and it points directly back to the practice we've been describing. Be heedful. Know that death is close, and let that knowledge do what it is designed to do. Wake you up, clean you up, and deliver you, not to dread, but to a joy that arises on its own, because there is nothing left in the way. That's the mechanism. Death awareness is the spark. Virtue is the fuel. And joy is the fire. Not the fire on your head, but the one that burns clean. But mechanisms are abstractions. The Buddha knew that, which is why the tradition preserves something more powerful than any chain of causation: stories. 2 women. 2 losses so total they shattered everything. And 2 arrivals through that shattering at exactly the joy we've been describing. Their names are Patācārā and Kisāgotamī, and their stories begin now. Part 3. The Stories. Everything we've described so far, the evening protocol, the binary, the cascade from virtue to joy, might sound clean on paper, almost too clean. A monk sits down, examines his mind, finds nothing unresolved, and joy arises automatically. But what about the person whose life has been torn apart? The person who hasn't lost a job or a relationship, but everything. Every person they loved in a matter of days? The Pali Canon preserves the stories of two such people, both women, both mothers, both pushed so far past the boundary of ordinary grief that one of them lost her mind and the other carried a dead child through the streets begging strangers for medicine. And both of them, through death, not despite it, arrived at exactly the liberation we've been describing. Part 3. The Stories. Patācārā was a young woman from a wealthy family in Savath. She eloped with a servant, scandalous enough to sever her from her entire family. They settled in a small village, far from anyone who knew her name. When she became pregnant with her second child, she begged her husband to take her back to her parents' home for the birth. He refused. She waited. She asked again. He refused again. Finally, heavily pregnant, she set out on her own. Her husband caught up to her on the road, carrying their firstborn son. Then the storm came. Labor began on the road, in the rain. Her husband went to clear ground and cut branches for a shelter. He didn't come back. She found him at dawn. A snake had bitten him in the night. He lay dead beside the half-built shelter. She kept walking, her newborn in her arms, her toddler holding her hand. Ahead, a river, swollen from the storm. She could not carry both children across at once. She set the older boy on the near bank. She carried the newborn across, placed him on the far side, and waded back for her firstborn. Halfway across the river, she saw a hawk circling above the newborn. She screamed. She waved her arms. The hawk dove. On the near bank, the older boy heard his mother scream, thought she was calling him, stepped into the current, and was swept away. The hawk took the baby. The river took the boy. The snake had taken the husband. Patācārā, standing in the middle of a swollen river, lost all three within hours. She walked toward Savathara's, toward her parents' home, the only place left. On the outskirts of the city, she met a traveler and asked about her family. The traveler's face changed. The night of the great storm, the same storm, her parents' house had collapsed. Her mother, her father, her brother, all three had died. Their bodies had been cremated together on a single pyre. The traveler pointed. You can still see the smoke. Patācāra's mind broke. She wandered through the streets of Savath, clothes torn away, not knowing where she was, not knowing her own name. People threw garbage at her. They shouted at her to leave. She was, in every sense that word carries, no one. A woman with no family, no home, no identity, no sanity. She wandered into the Jeta Grove where the Buddha was teaching. The monks tried to turn her away. The Buddha stopped them, and he said one sentence. Sister, recover your mindfulness. Satim patilabha. That was all. Not a teaching, not a consolation, not an explanation of karma or impermanence or the meaning of suffering. One instruction, come back to awareness. And she did. The commentaries tell us she regained her composure. as if the sentence itself was the hand that pulled her out of the water. The Buddha taught her, she ordained, she practiced, and her awakening, when it came, arrived through the most ordinary image. One evening, washing her feet, she poured water from a vessel and watched it flow across the ground. The first stream ran a short distance and stopped. The second went further. The third went furthest of all. Short life, medium life, long life, all of them, flowing, stopping, gone. She saw impermanence not as doctrine, but as water on the ground, and something in her shifted. Later that night, she reached for the pin beside her oil lamp and pulled the wick down. The flame flickered and went out. Her own words, preserved in verse, like the flame's unbinding, was the liberation of awareness. Thig 5.10. The woman who had lost everything, husband, children, parents, brother, mind, did not describe her liberation as escape from pain. She described it as a flame going out, quiet, clean, complete. After her awakening, Patācārā became one of the foremost teachers in the Buddha's community. Her specialty, her particular gift, was teaching mothers who had lost children. 500 women, the texts say, came to her with their grief, and she taught them from the place only someone who has lost everything can teach from. Her teaching verse to them was simple. As he came, so he has gone. So what is there to lament? Not cold, not dismissive. Spoken by a woman who had watched a hawk take her baby and a river take her boy. Spoken from the far side of the grief they were standing in. Part 3. The Stories. Kisāgotamī. Kisāgotamī's loss was narrower, but no less total. She had one son. He was her entire world, partly because, as a woman of low birth who had married into a higher family, the child was her only source of standing. Without him, she was no one. The child died. Kisāgotamī could not accept it. She carried the small body from house to house through the village, knocking on doors, asking, begging for medicine. Please, medicine for my son. The neighbors looked at her with pity, with discomfort, with the particular helplessness of people watching someone refuse to see what everyone else can see. No one could give her what she wanted. Someone, perhaps the only truly kind person she met that day, said, "Go to the monk Gautama. He may have medicine." She went to the Buddha, carrying her dead child, and asked for medicine. The Buddha did not correct her. He did not say, "Your son is dead." He did not explain impermanence. He said, "Go into the city. Bring me a mustard seed from any house where no one has ever died." A mustard seed, the most common spice in any kitchen. Every household had one. Kisāgotamī went from door to door. At the first house, "Yes, we have mustard seeds. Take as many as you like." "Has anyone ever died in this house?" A pause. "My mother, 2 years ago." She moved on. The next house. "My husband, last monsoon season." The next. "Our eldest daughter." The next. "My father and his father before him." Every house could offer the seed. Not one could say that death had never visited. Door by door, the teaching entered, not through her intellect, but through her feet. Every threshold she crossed, every family that said, "Yes, we have known death." Each one was a line of the sutta the Buddha was writing with her own journey. By evening, she had not found the seed. She carried her son to the charnel ground, the burning ground outside the city, and laid him down. "Dear child," she said, "I thought this was a thing that happened to you alone, but it is not a thing that happened to you alone. It is the nature of all people." She returned to the Buddha. She ordained, she practiced, and her awakening verses, when they came, carried the same note as Patācāra's. Not grief, not resignation, but something fiercer and more alive. I've taken the medicine, I've reached the deathless. Thig 10.1. The medicine the Buddha gave her was not a mustard seed. It was the walk itself, the door-to-door confrontation with the universality of death, carried out not in a meditation hall, but in the streets, in the kitchens of strangers, in the dust. And when Mara, the personification of death and delusion in Buddhist texts, confronted her later, testing her resolve, her response was absolute. I've gotten past the death of sons. Having conquered the army of death, I dwell without defiling taints. Part 3. The stories. 2 women, 2 liberations. 2 women, 2 extreme losses, 2 pathways through death to liberation. Patācāra's loss was sudden, total destruction in a single storm. Her awakening came through seeing, water flowing across ground, a flame going out. Impermanence perceived directly in the smallest things, after surviving the largest. Kisāgotamī's realization was guided, door by door, the Buddha leading her through a process so gradual, it barely looked like teaching. Her awakening came through walking, every household a lesson, every threshold a line of scripture her body was memorizing before her mind caught up. Different losses, different pedagogies, the same arrival. And notice, both women describe their liberation not as escape from death, but in the language of the deathless. Patācārā. I've reached the deathless, plowing the field with the plows of mindfulness. Kisāgotamī. I've taken the medicine, I've reached the deathless. The same word the Buddha used in AN 6.20 when he said that nightly death contemplation gains a footing in the deathless. Which brings us, finally, to the question this entire video has been circling. What is the deathless, and how does contemplating death lead you there? Part 4. The practice plus the deathless. The 7 similes. 2,500 years ago, long before the Buddha, there was a teacher named Araka. The texts say he lived in an age when human lifespan was 60,000 years. And even then, with 60,000 years stretching ahead of him, Araka taught his students about the brevity of life. AN 7.70. He used 7 similes. Life is like a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass. When the sun rises, it doesn't last long. Like a bubble on water when rain falls, it appears and it's gone. Like a line drawn in water, even as you trace it, it vanishes. Like a mountain stream after heavy rain, rushing, tumbling, never pausing for a single moment. Like a glob of spit on the tip of the tongue. How little effort it takes to cast it away. Like a piece of meat thrown into a hot iron pan. It doesn't last long. Like a cow led to slaughter, with every step she comes closer to the knife. The Buddha recounts all 7, and then he adds a line that lands like a stone dropped into still water. That was when human lifespan was 60,000 years. Now, lifespan is short. Whoever lives long lives 100 years, or a little more. And his instruction: practice jhana, monks. Don't be heedless. Don't later fall into regret. This is our message to you. There's something in the accumulation of those 7 images: dewdrop, bubble, line in water, stream, spit, meat, cow, that no philosophical argument achieves. Each one is faster than the last, each one more visceral. By the time you reach the cow walking toward the knife, you're not hearing a teaching about impermanence. You're feeling the ground move under your feet. And the punchline: that was when lifespan was 60,000 years, strips away any distance you might have placed between yourself and the teaching. If brevity was urgent, then what is it now? Part 4. The practice plus the deathless. Opportunity, not terror. But here is where the Buddha's teaching diverges, sharply, decisively, from every other tradition that asks you to contemplate death. The response is not, life is short, therefore despair. The response is not, life is short, therefore seize pleasure while you can. The response is not even, life is short, therefore accept it with dignity. The response is, life is short, therefore practice. Therefore, wake up. Therefore, stop wasting the breath you're breathing right now on things that don't lead to freedom. Thanissaro Bhikkhu, one of the foremost translators of the Pali Canon, puts it in terms so practical they almost sound casual. I could do a lot with this one breath I may have left. Look for those opportunities. One breath, not as a countdown to panic, as an opening. This breath, the one you're taking right now, is not the problem. It's the laboratory. It's the field of practice. Everything the Buddha taught can be done in it. And elsewhere, Thanissaro reframes death contemplation entirely. When you meditate, you're getting practice in how to die well. Like learning a foreign language before being deported to a country where no one speaks yours. You don't learn it out of dread. You learn it because it will be useful when you arrive. Mindfulness of death, he writes, does not take death as its primary focus. You keep awareness of death in the back of your mind so you can focus on the work that needs to be done. Death in the back, the work in the front. Urgency serving clarity, not feeding anxiety. This is the warm urgency we've been describing since the opening of this video, not the heaviness of I'm going to die, the lightness of I'm alive right now and I know what to do with it, the deathless. And now, the thread we've been following since part 1. 4 times in this video, we've encountered the same word. In AN 6.20, the nightly death practice gains a footing in the deathless. In the Dhammapada, heedfulness is the path to the deathless. In Patācāra's verses, I've reached the deathless. In Kisāgotamī's, I've taken the medicine, I've reached the deathless. Amata, the deathless. The structural irony at the center of the Buddha's teaching on death is this. The practice of contemplating death, of sitting with it nightly, unflinchingly, specifically, is not ultimately about death. It is the doorway to something the Buddha describes as beyond death entirely. The very first thing the Buddha said after his awakening, the first words before any sutta, before the 4 noble truths, before the 8-fold path, was an invitation. Open are the doors to the deathless, MN 26. Not, open are the doors to acceptance. Not, open are the doors to a slightly better coping mechanism. Part 4. The practice plus the deathless. The deathless. And what is it? The tradition is careful here, careful in a way that should be respected. Nibbana, the deathless, is described more by what it is not than by what it is. There is, monks, that dimension where there is neither earth, nor water, nor fire, nor wind, neither this world nor the next, neither coming, nor going, nor staying, neither passing away, nor arising. The UD 8.1. But it is not nothing. The same passage continues. Without that, there would be no escape from birth, aging, and death. And Thanissaro Bhikkhu, with characteristic directness, cuts through the mystification. Nibbana is the ultimate bliss, a bliss beyond feelings of bliss, totally unconditioned. And then he adds with a note that sounds almost amused. Given the extremely positive nature of this message, victory over death, it's ironic that generations in the West have viewed the Buddha as a pessimist. Victory over death. That's the destination of a practice that begins every evening with imagining a snake might bite you in the night. Part 4. The practice plus the deathless. Tonight before sleep. So let us return to where we began. AN 6.20, the evening practice. The protocol the Buddha prescribed for monks, and that the tradition has preserved with its scorpions and bile and wind forces and unyielding binary for 2,500 years. Tonight, if you choose, you can do something very simple. Sit on the edge of your bed, not in any special posture, not with any special equipment. Just sit for a moment in the space between the day that is ending and the sleep that is coming, and ask, if this is the last night, and it might be, the dewdrop doesn't negotiate with the sun, is there anything in my mind I haven't dealt with? If yes, deal with it, not tomorrow, not next week, as if your head were on fire. Send the message, make the call, drop the grudge, abandon the quality you know is there and have been pretending isn't. If no, and this is the part the world has not heard clearly enough, then the Buddha's instruction is not to brace yourself, not to feel the weight of mortality pressing down, not to grit your teeth through the darkness. Dwell in joy. Not because you've earned it, not because you've manufactured it, because when there is nothing unresolved, when virtue is genuine and the mind is clean, joy is what arises on its own. Dhammata, in the nature of things. AN 11.2. The cascade begins, gladness, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and beyond concentration, the knowledge, the vision, the deathless itself. Two women knew this. Patācārā, who lost everything in a storm and watched a flame go out and called it liberation. Kisāgotamī, who walked from door to door and discovered that death is not a thing that happens to you alone, and called the discovery medicine. A teacher named Araka knew it when lifespan was 60,000 years. The Buddha knew it when lifespan was 100. You know it now, with whatever time you have left. Dewdrop, bubble, line in water, one breath. The Buddha's last word, lying on his side between two sal trees surrounded by monks who were about to lose him, was not a doctrine. It was not a revelation. It was a single Pali word that contains everything we've discussed tonight. Appamadina sampadetha. DN 16. Bring about completion through heedfulness. Be heedful. The heedful do not die. DHP 21. And the doors to the deathless, they are open.